Hey, everybody, I'm Corey, and I'm joined by my co host, Gerald Mendoza, and this is We Talk Politics. Today, we have a good bit to talk about, including the presidential race for polling, their lookout on states, some economic matters, as well as a couple other things, but you'll just have to stay tuned for the whole podcast to check it all out. Just a reminder, if you could give a like if you like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of our content. We're here every week. You can check our VODs. You can just check them through the channel if you want to watch. Anyway, let's get straight into it. Gerald, right now, they just released a couple days ago, the Democrat and Republican, their propositions for the next wave of spending and assistance packages from the federal government to put down to the people, businesses, and state governments, and as well as local governments. Can you give us a little bit of a rundown of this?
Sure. The shorthand for this is they're going to call these stimulus packages for each party. So the GOP one and the Democratic one. The GOP stimulus package is for, well, I'll give you the divisions first and then give you the overall price tag at the end. And they're allocating $200 billion for small business assistance, $203 billion for business tax breaks, $300 billion for stimulus check distribution, $111 billion for the health sector, $110 billion for unemployment benefits, $105 billion for state and local aid, and $81 billion for other measures, uh, probably small miscellaneous things that the government can use the money to distribute, and $18 billion is a safety net and other costs involved with that. And the price tag for that whole bill, that whole project that they want to put through is $1.1 trillion. We see Corey rolling his eyes.
It's a big number, and I'm afraid because I know that there's an even bigger number to come.
Well, if you know Democrats, and I think we do, the Democratic package has some very different distribution numbers in terms of they have basically the same categories, but you'll note that the numbers are very different. And starting with the first one, they have allocated $0.00 for small business assistance in the Democratic stimulus package. $46 billion for small business tax breaks.
Oh, these are just general business tax breaks.
I mean, general business tax breaks, correct. $436 billion for a new stimulus check, the new wave of stimulus checks. The $382 billion for the health sector, $437 billion for unemployment benefits, $1,118 billion or $1.118 trillion for state and local aid, $302 billion for other measures, and $736 billion for a safety net. Now, that all amounts to $3.4 trillion.
Oh, I'm going to go ahead and empty out my wallet now because I know when Taxman comes looking, I don't want him to have anything to find. A couple deeper things. So those are just the general measures to look up. If anybody at home wants to make a chart for that, we can feature it on our Twitter for anybody to look out for. However, what we see in here, there's some additional things. For example, the Republicans are proposing more funding for their payment protection loans, which will just help out people all around for both businesses as well as the people themselves. And also I'm reading here, the Democrats want to continue the unemployment benefits through January, and the Republicans are proposing reducing it to $200 per week additionally. Right now it's $600 a week. through September with a plan to set total benefits at 70% of lost income after that. Essentially being a retirement is what that is 70% of your income, which is a perfectly reasonable thing. In addition to this, the Democrats their plan is about 3 times more costly than the Republican plan. And one of the reasons for this is that they wish to allow undocumented immigrants to receive money from this as well in their stimulus package that goes out to different families and people and businesses. And both parties have, as you read out, included extra healthcare measures to bolster the healthcare industry right now to help them out with any inpatient and outpatient help. And there are some other line items that I see. Some Republican senators were surprised to learn that their plan included $1.75 billion for a new FBI headquarters, which currently I believe the FBI is based out of Quantico in Virginia.
Yeah, I think that's where their main.
That's their main, but they also have the one right in DC.
The one in DC. Well, they've been trying, and like I said, I listen to a lot of local Washington DC radio station, news stations. There's a couple of them, and they're very. I like radio news because, for the most part, if they're local, they're very much straight to the fact, unbiased, and pretty good at just reporting facts. But they had been, and I mean, this has been going on for the last 5 or 6 years. They've been wanting a new FBI headquarters with I think it's Hubert H. Humphrey, something Humphrey, or something. It has one of the names of one of the former heads of the FBI, but it is a pretty old and somewhat dilapidated building. It fits the scenery in some of the parts of DC, but they've been trying to get rid of that or knock it down and build a new one for a long time, and somehow, somewhere, you know, litigation or some red tape or something, just something always gets in the way. And this is, I think I think that aspect of the bill is a stretch too opportunistic, if you will.
I'm going to offer a redaction of what I just said. The current FBI headquarters is the J. Edgar Hoover Building on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., although the Quantico location is one of their main sites that they utilize, in addition to the Marines practicing there.
Right. Yeah, that's like where they train in Quantico,
right.
Virginia.
Correct. Yeah, that's their training site.
But still, like I said, this seems like a bit of a stretch too opportunistic for me and my personal taste. I don't know. You could agree or disagree with us, but I don't think a new headquarters is in check right now, especially considering how much each bill is proposing the U.S. spends right now and how much debt we are in already. Corey, if you could let us know what the live U.S. debt clock is showing these days.
I'm not looking at the live debt clock right now, as I already know the number, and we are gearing towards very, very quickly hitting $26,600,000,000,000 in debt. And what this means for us is that if the Democrat proposal is to pass through the Senate, or if the Republican one were to pass through both chambers and then signed off, then it would put our national debt up to, well, it was 1.1 trillion for the Republican.
Yeah.
Then that would put our national debt up to $27.7 trillion that we're currently in debt, with public debt as well as government debt as well. However, if the Democrat plan is to be established, that is the 3.4 trillion, and that would lead us to, right on the dollar, $30 trillion in debt. To put that into perspective, 14 years ago, in 2006, we're going to have a little trivia time. 14 years ago, in 2006, the national debt was A, 2 trillion, B, 6 trillion, C, 8 trillion, or D, 20 trillion. What do you think it is, Joe?
We're going to go with lucky letter C, 8 trillion.
You'd be correct.
There you go.
14 years ago. Just 14 years. We have gone from $8 trillion in debt to a whopping 26.5 trillion, looking at 30 right over the horizon. Now, you were talking to me in the pre-show about how you remember wondering if we were even going to hit 20. People were like, oh, are we going to hit 20? And then on a more little morbid note of it, the thinking of, oh, well, what gets rid of debt? War. And so you got to think that there's got to be something coming on. And I'm not talking about war like we've seen with America being the world's policeman, because that costs only us money. We don't get anything out of it. We saw that in Iraq, where we went into war solely for the purpose of gaining access to the Kuwaiti oil fields and the Iraqi area in order to establish our place in the Middle East. And we still got in debt with that. I mean, 2006 is 14 years ago, and we're still in Afghanistan. Troops haven't been pulled out as they were promised. People are still there. More people are being sent in. People are being taken out. We still haven't established there. But this almost eyeballs, and with the political climate at the beginning of the year in January, it looks like we might be on the brink of something big.
I mean, yeah, they're partially due to the diplomatic state of the United States right now, with its head of state being Donald J. Trump. For and let's be honest, there's been some good things that have come out of this administration. But for every good thing, there's been at least two or three bad things to pair it with. At least visually, in terms of how the world has visualized this country.
Well, I'm going to take a little detour from that point and almost say that I want to put this out here. I'm not a 45 fan. I'm not a supporter of President Donald Trump. But when you look at all the past presidencies, as terrible as this has been for people living in the United States and people around that, there hasn't been anything groundbreaking. I mean, you look back 2 presidents ago with George W. Bush, with W, and it's rife with troubles with Iraq and 9/11, and then the recession hitting. With Barack Obama, you have problems within that administration as ignoring congressional orders not to send people out and mobilizing the military to hit on the Middle East. You have George H.W. Bush not de-escalating our conflict in the Cold War when Mikhail Gorbachev gave him an easy out to said, hey, sign these papers and let's get rid of nuclear weapons. Any president that you look at has something almost terrible that happened or that did happen on the foreign field. However, the one really, really, really excellent takeaway I will take with me from these last 4 years is globally, there hasn't been a problem. I know there have been small missteps along the way when we talk about North Korea, and that was a problem, and then Russia, but there's no mobilization of military. There's no secret police going around.
There almost was a mobilization of military. We got, if you remember, I don't know how long ago it was. It feels like it was 3 years ago, but it was in January. We were about that close to doing something to Iran again.
Do you know what almost means?
Means it didn't.
Means not quite.
Fair enough. I mean,
the absolute, I will say that the worst thing that has happened on the foreign field was we assassinate a top Irani general or Irani general?
Yes. And even though he was
not a good guy, not a bad guy.
He's not a good guy, but it definitely wasn't the time.
No, but we haven't found ourselves. Go ahead.
What made that situation at least breathable for some people, or at least made de-escalate. Listen, Iran de-escalated it themselves when they accidentally shot a plane down, and they were like, maybe we should take a step back.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, we have these, in every single administration and every presidency, there's going to be a foreign aspect to it. But luckily, our president has been so bad at juggling things here in America that he hasn't even had time to look at other countries. And I take that as an absolute win for the entire world. This man has his hand, he has the launch codes, he could get them at any time. He could put his hand on the button right now if he wanted to, but he hasn't because he's been too busy messing other things up.
Fair enough. We got to find that silver lining somewhere.
Gotta find the silver lining.
But even so, even here in this country, his allies are starting to fall away with his sporadic nature. You know, I think people were expecting after 4 years for President Trump to mellow down with the Twitter posts and the um, let's say jocular attitude towards
I would say
certain
pompous.
events. Yeah, pompous is probably a better word. Yeah, that another he's been losing support in Congress. He disagrees with the GOP um, stimulus package for certain reasons, and he definitely doesn't like the Democratic one. Obviously, he's also losing allies in certain states. He started losing them when he started trying to throw governors and certain people under the bus during the pandemic instead of trying to openly communicate with them as much as possible. Even though he has, and Governor Hogan being the leader, the chair of the National Governors Association, has led a very good, or it has organized the state governors, I think, in a very well mannered way, and has really kept everything organized and easy for the president to communicate with.
Well,
Although
if
I think the president could have done more to reach out for them in the beginning instead of waiting for the states to come to him at certain points.
Of course. Well, if you remember early in the pandemic, I believe this was around February or March. And I think it was March. I can't remember any dates at this point. It all seems like it's been a series of like decades right now, even though it's only been a matter of months.
Right.
But early on in the pandemic, when it became a pandemic, uh, the current president had asked, or not asked, he specifically demanded that Larry Hogan not ship in masks from Korea. And Larry Hogan brought in the masks from Korea, the N95 respirators. He brought those in and masks to help the Maryland people, putting all any order from the president on hold. And there were no repercussions from it. But then also you see Donald Trump hammering the mayor of Atlanta and the governor of Georgia, as well as governors all across the 50 states for their mistakes and missteps. But we haven't seen him, as you said, working with them until now. And at this point, you could call it too little too late.
I mean, it could be. I mean, in our eyes, it could be, but maybe to his supporters, it could be just enough to make sure they stay on his side. He definitely look. There's definitely been some governors that deserve some reprimand. We're looking at you, Michigan. I'm not
Texas.
saying right. Yeah, I'm not saying everything the president says about a certain person in reprimand is good because it isn't. But also, you still are in charge of the state that hasn't fixed Flint's water. And to think the governor of Michigan was uh, on Joe Biden's short list for being a vice presidential pick.
That's rough.
By the way, we'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah, I kind of find it hard to. Well, I'm going to proceed my point with that the step from governor to president, the step from state to federal really comes at the expense or at the condition of you have to have managed your state very well. And in Michigan, we have not seen that managed very well. You can say, I mean, we've had issues all across the United States, but Michigan specifically, this person, I'm not sure how long he's been in office, but Flint, the water crisis in Flint has been going on for, I couldn't tell you how many years. I would ballpark it and say 6, but I don't know because it's been that long. And it's nothing's been done. People are without clean water. And that gets to my point. if you're going to be the vice president of the United States, you need to have been a decent governor and getting to do the things that need to be done. And I don't think that that's the person for the job. If you can't
Right.
fix one city not having water or clean water, accessible water over the course of your entire governorship.
Exactly. And with that, we are going to transition to our next point, which is the state of Nevada has. This also ties into the reprimands of President Trump. The state of Nevada, I think earlier today, made a decision to expand the capacity of its mail in voting procedure for this year's election. Their idea is that COVID-19 is now a reason for someone to request a mail in ballot instead of actually having to go to the polls on election day um, for them to vote. And I get it that there's a give and take to this. The positive outcome of this, obviously, is that there's less exposure to other people in large groups on a single day, which is really not a good idea, depending on if people have COVID 19 and aren't telling anybody or decide to go vote and throw caution to the wind, or if certain procedures aren't met. It makes it a lot easier if at least a significant portion of the state's voting body decides to mail it in, preferably early, um, but mail in their ballots instead of all deciding to go together on election day to the polls, which I know are going to be reduced because of COVID-19. Like the number of polling stations is going to be reduced because that seems to be what they were doing during primaries. Now, the obviously the other side of the coin to that is that when you mail in your votes, it takes much longer for them to count. And yes, there is a strain on the U.S. Postal Service in terms of what they are able to deliver and their own systems capacity to deliver, you know, mail-in ballots. And I would say there is the possibility of a security issue, though I don't think it's as I think all these complaints that have been put up aren't as bad as people are pushing them to be. They're very big what ifs, in my opinion, but they are legitimate claims to take a second thought on the idea. So, you know, and also, should people not mail it in time, or should the U.S. Postal Service be bogged down by so much delivery traffic, especially in the world we're living in right now, where everything is being delivered to home or being sent away without trying to have to drive anywhere or go out? Yeah, there is a strain on that system. And so the potential is that things could last longer than election night. And like we had mentioned a few episodes ago, this could turn into potentially election week. And that could be, I don't know. It could, for some people, delegitimize the actual election process for this year, but I don't think so. I just think it's going to be a nuisance, but a very 2020 thing if election day turns into election week, depending on how each state decides to manage its voting procedures.
Well, yeah, and the mail-in ballots, as you said, they won't have enough polling places as they normally would. They wouldn't have as many. And I believe in Maryland already there have been significant numbers of poll workers and poll judges who have said, "Sorry, I'm not going to work this due to the coronavirus and COVID-19 problems that have been presented." And it leads to what's the other option? And mail-in ballots seem to be the most appealing. I mean, we've already seen them used in elections for people who can't leave the house for certain reasons, or absentee ballots. Um, but we see these issues on both sides of it. I mean, if you do mail-in voting, it is going to take a lot longer, and that's just the way that the postal system works. It puts additional stress on the United States postal system, and on the other side, you look at it and what's the other option? I mean, do you extend voting to a week and have people cycle in to the voting booths in person?
I
Because
think
then you have to expand the budget for elections.
I think honestly, the model they have right now with a few tweaks could work in terms of in-person voting should they want to make that the primary, which always is the primary method to vote on election day, is to use early voting and then cycle people through early voting. That way, whatever capacity you have, you know the capacity of each polling place. You know where you can do it. You could even do it location by location, depending on how you want to divide it. If secretary of each state makes their own decision on how they want to do that. But early voting is still a legitimate vote, and I think it could potentially work in everyone's favor to be possibly assigned a certain day, because the biggest thing about the reason everyone waits until polls close, the reason everyone waits until election night, is because that's the finality of the process that holds so much importance in our country. So the finality is what people are trying to preserve. The actual, okay, tonight is where it ends. Tonight is where the decision, finally closes everything down. This whole process will show its results. And, obviously 2001 didn't work out the way everyone planned. But for the most part, election night has been a pretty good end to the election process. And if you want to keep that, I just say instead of expanding it later, use early voting and assign people there. Say, okay, everyone with, I don't know, everyone in this zip code can go on this day, and here are your polling locations. After that, if you want to use another location, or if you want to use the same location and just, make sure you have less people, all right, everyone in this zip code, or in this neighborhood, or in this borough, or in this, section of the county, or in this school district, if you want to divide it that way. All of these options that are available, I think if you put some thought into it and use early voting as these new like as segmented blocks of voting, and still don't show any results, it would still give the Board of Elections and the USPS, should they also be used, enough time and enough, leeway and breathing room to manage the whole process, while also giving people the option to vote in person, and making sure there's less people around, using your resources to your advantage, and also keeping election night.
Yeah, well, looking back to your comment on the 2001 election, there's a reason why we don't use punch card ballots anymore,
Right.
and it's because of that reason. But as you were saying, I mean, the early voting seems to be like a strong option if you can divvy up people and give them, a line number and say, hey, if your number is from this to that, then show up on this day. If it's this to that, then show up on this day, and turn it into a little longer of a thing. But we need to keep that sort of finality. That's why people go to the final vote on that day. It's November 3rd this year.
Also, yeah, just sorry. The reason you also wait, they also news organizations and everybody also waits until right after the polls are closed to make any projections or show any results, is to make sure that whatever they are reporting does not interfere with the people who may still be there to vote. Like, the idea is that once the polls close, barring long lines in certain areas, and they don't want whatever results come out to change your mind on what your vote is. So that's why they wait until your state is closed and then they announce.
Yeah. I really don't think that the mail-in voting process. I don't think that it is going to be totally effable this year. As people have been suggesting, it could take as long as 2 weeks for your ballot to reach count, and by that time, that would mean you'd have to mail it in by like October 18th in order to get it in, which could be a hassle if people have that November 3rd date circled on their calendars. And then how long, like which date will you even get your ballot? There's countless problems that we see with this, but it seems like it's what we have. And with regards to the Nevada thing, I believe, I'm not sure if you already mentioned, Donald Trump is threatening to sue the governor of Nevada for this.
Right. He put out a tweet or something. I believe it was something. It was a tweet. I know that. And what a world we live in where our presidential statements are official on Twitter. But I think Okay, let's see here. The tweet originally. Oh, they don't. Okay. Okay. The original tweet was by Adam Paul Laxalt of Nevada. I don't know what position he has or what office he holds, but he says Governor Sisolak and the Nevada Democrats called a special session with no public
He
present.
was the former Nevada Attorney General.
Okay, with a special session with no public present and inside 24 hours are are ramming through mail-in balloting and ballot harvesting. They are massively altering our election 97 days out entirely without the Secretary of State. They're working to steal our election. And that was the claim from from Adam Paul Laxalt, the former Secretary of State, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, yeah. And
No, former Attorney General of Nevada. He
okay,
lost his seat in the 2018 gubernatorial election.
okay, yeah. And President Trump, obviously, this is outrageous, must mean what immediate litigation and so on and so forth. I think I'm going to have to look for this tweet manually, but let's see here. Let's see. It's.
The tweet also may have been since deleted if you cannot find it, as we are finding that happening more often than not from the president.
Right, yeah, or from his staff, who knows who actually has access to that. So, yeah. But it was a tweet nonetheless that claimed that a suit was coming in Nevada's way for, basically deciding to expand mail in voting that President Trump is not very fond of at the moment.
Yeah, he's not very close in with anybody who does not. Let me rephrase that. Anybody who's supporting the mail-in ballots, he's finding an issue with, and I think that he believes that it threatens his legitimacy to a win in some sort of way, or he believes that people are more likely to commit voter fraud with mail-in ballots, as we saw in small cases in 2016 with deceased people voting for president. That same issue could happen with mail-in ballots, since you are not required to show up with your ID or your voter registration card.
Right. It also happened in the 1960 election between JFK and Richard Nixon.
We know how that one went.
Yeah. So like I said, there's an air of truth to almost every single claim, but the way it's presented and the overreaching statements about each claim is definitely not helping the president's cause. And I don't think you can sue the state of Nevada for making a decision about how they're deciding to run their election.
No, I don't believe so either. I think that it falls into the state's hands, and as outlined as in voting documents by the Constitution, if anything, it would have to run through the the Supreme Court, and I do not believe that they would rule in favor of the president on this one.
I don't believe so either. So, all of that being said, we are still focusing on an election. We are 2 weeks away from the Democratic National Convention. 3 weeks
Exactly
away.
2 weeks.
Right, and exactly 3 weeks away from the Republican National Convention, which, by the way, the media has not been invited to. The
That's
renomination will
really
be
interesting.
the renomination will be held in private. The RNC is claiming the COVID-19, not wanting to have that many people there at the location in North Carolina. But I also think there's a second, probably a second reason why the media has not been invited. For the most part, I think almost everybody, including Fox News, has fallen out of grace with our president, and therefore he probably doesn't want to deal with them. So that's going to be a very, very, very interesting convention to try to cover, because I think maybe only C-SPAN is going to be there, and maybe PBS.
Maybe PBS.
Maybe PBS. We know President Trump has had his issues with PBS in the past. But that being said, exactly 2 weeks away from the Democratic National Convention, it goes first this year, and we still do not have Joe Biden's vice presidential pick. Apparently, all signs are still pointing towards Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris being the pick, but Corey and I still don't like that pick. We like Val Demings. We really do. I think it was announced that who's the mayor of Atlanta?
I'm not sure.
The mayor of Atlanta. She was on the short list. Um, and also Senator Tammy Duckworth. Both of them, of both of them, have been already scheduled by the DNC to speak at the convention anyway, or speak for the convention anyway. Not at, I don't believe. I think for the virtual convention that they're going to have. So I think that's an indicator that tells me
That
they
they've
might
been
not
ruled
be.
out.
They've been ruled out. They're given a
Well,
spot, but
in that case, on the election betting odds, which we love so much,
oh yeah, definitely.
Tammy Duckworth currently has an 8.3% chance to win, with Kamala Harris leading at 44.8, Rice in second with 17.3, and Val Demings with 9%.
Here's the thing.
8% for Tammy Duckworth could go anywhere.
Here's the thing. I like last week. I was thinking to myself. I'm like, because Val Demings fell into like sixth place at one point. Like I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I guess I don't know. I guess the enthusiasm's not there, but this this thing updates every 5 minutes, and in the last day, just one day, Val Demings has gone up by 5.2%. So she's making strides here, and I think that's good news for you and I and our pick that we think would be a perfect fit for, President Biden.
Right. Well, and what we're seeing here, what I believe the issue coming down to this is that not many people are seeming to care about the vice president. I haven't heard any discussion from anybody who I follow on any social media platforms about any concern or any support for any of the potential Biden Veep picks.
Here's the thing. I don't think the general public is making any quarrels about whoever it's going to pick, because it's already been announced it's going to be an African American one by like almost certainly, or at least a woman.
Yeah, well, I still think that there's an enormous difference between taking Kamala Harris and taking Val Demings. I think that those are two completely different sides of the Democratic coin.
Right.
And to say that you don't care who the vice president is, you and I both believe that this vice president, if Joe Biden is to become president for number 46 in January of 2021,
he's not doing 2 terms.
Then he's not doing 2 terms, and that whoever his vice president is would be the heir apparent to the American dynasty.
And here's the thing: I think both of the parties, like the committees and the members of the parties, are in that understanding, are in that state of mind where they understand, okay, yeah, this next vice president for the Democrats is most likely going to be the heir apparent, or is going to be part of the wave of whoever is going to be the heir apparent. And I think, I don't know, the progressive movement might be getting in, like I've said, the progressive movement keeps on shooting the Democrats in the foot because they're half-hearted about it, and they need to make a decision whether they're actually going to push more progressive, which I don't think is the best idea, or they're going to stay moderate. But they can't keep on how one of my old world history teachers used to say, they can't keep on pussyfooting around the issue. They need to take a stance about whether they're actually going to push further to the left or stay closer to the middle, and see where that is actually going to benefit. Because right now, I think the majority of voting age population in the United States identifies as Democratic. So I think the ball's in their court, but they still the problem is, at this point, more than I've ever seen before, this is a Democrats' election to lose by miles.
So it was 2016.
No, but this one even more so. But still,
because the guy who barely won last election has done things to put people who voted for him out of favor. So this is his election to win. Like, this is like, he needs to do something grand here, or the Democrats really need to fail themselves.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, is that I'm waiting for something, especially the way this year is going, but I'm waiting for something, unfortunately, that is going to make me say, crap, Trump's going to win again.
Well, Gerald, as you were saying earlier with just in that last couple sentences, as you were saying with the progressives in the Democratic Party currently with their problems with not being able to make up their mind between going wherever they want to go, they also haven't found a leader, somebody who they can all get behind and go for. I mean, you've had people who, like, here's your options of people who have been touted up as the people is Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. Those have been the people who they are pushing up to the top. And none of these people have energy. They're not moderate to find their some way within. They're either way too establishment or way too progressive. And they're not finding any way to meet it in the middle. And no Democrat in the House or Senate or anybody is seeming to look towards one person to unify both different sects of the Democratic Party.
Right. And like, yeah, this is definitely visualized for me in that who's the leader of the progressives in the House? Like, do you know? Like the new leader of the progressives. AOC.
AOC. Yeah, her and Ilhan
Right.
Omar.
Right. But do you know who would be, I think, is in line to be the new leader of the moderates in the House, in the Dems?
I couldn't tell you.
Representative Joe Kennedy III. I'm not lying.
Another Kennedy?
Yeah, there's another Kennedy in the House. Did you know that?
I could have assumed. If you would have asked me yes or no, I would say probably.
There is. And honestly, like, some projections say maybe in the 2024 election, he might be actually.
Well, there would have been another Kennedy president if he weren't assassinated right out of the DNC. Robert Kennedy won the nomination and then he got killed.
I still don't understand. Like, I still don't understand. One missed question messed up Ted Kennedy, like, for the presidency. One question. And you know what the question was?
What was the question?
Why do you want to become the president?
Oh.
He fumbled it. And that ended, and that's why Jimmy Carter became the president.
Peanut.
Or that's why he became the nomination.
I couldn't tell you how Jimmy Carter became president. I couldn't tell you.
Well, because peanut farmers seemed very in season at the time. But enough about. But we're considering that Joe Biden has said to some staffers he wants to make the announcement, which means it's most likely going to come during the first week of August, and we are in the first week of August, so we are just waiting patiently for that announcement to come, and we will bring you as much information when it comes out live, and we will basically react with you and try to make sense of whoever President or Vice President Biden picks to be his vice president on the ticket. But also, news I heard also on news radio, local Washington News Radio station, partnered with CBS World News Radio. Vice President Biden has shifted his focus, at least somewhat, and is putting more people, resources, and attention to another state. And that state is Big Texas.
Big Texas. If you know, you know.
Absolutely. But, Corey, I want to get your reaction to...
I totally forgot about that.
We have Big Texas.
Big Texas, $1. All right. So my reaction, I almost think that, you know, we had dished about this in numerous podcasts about how it's going to go with different states leaning away. But with him focusing on Texas and Virginia specifically, or North Carolina. No, that wasn't it. It was just Texas, right?
Texas is the one getting the focus. And based on polls, Georgia and North Carolina have been put into the toss-up category.
It's bupkis. That's ridiculous.
Well, Texas, we know how you feel. We know how you feel about polls.
No, I feel about polls. I'm not a big fan. We saw how it worked in 2016. Didn't. So the thing that I'm taking away from Texas has nothing to do with Texas. Nothing at all. It is that he is not focusing on Florida and he's not focusing on Pennsylvania, which we have believed, and we've looked at this on the podcast. You can check out the old ones if you haven't seen them, or just remember off the top of your noggin. Pennsylvania is a 20 delegate area.
20,
It's got
20
20
vote. Yeah.
electoral college votes. So that's a nice area, and it went red last election. And Joe Biden loves to say that he's a Pennsylvania guy, born in Pennsylvania, right? Yeah,
He is born in Pennsylvania. He just served as a senator from Delaware, but
right.
he is from Pennsylvania. His family is from Pennsylvania.
So there's two things that I take away from somebody not campaigning somewhere, and it's that they either think there's no way they can win it or that they have it in the bag. And he's doing this with two of the most important states that the Republicans would like to have, and that's with Florida and with Pennsylvania. I haven't seen him pushing much in terms of Pennsylvania, and I haven't seen anything in terms of Florida. Now, this push on Texas is going to be a really strong power move, and I can see it falling apart. I can see him pushing far in Texas and not getting anything. And as we know, it's a winner take all system in all states except for two. So I think if this is an investment because he could walk away with Texas and then also have gotten Pennsylvania. But he could have lost focus on Pennsylvania. And because of that, it would remain red from last election. And then you have Pennsylvania, Florida, and Texas all going red, which is not a good look when you're starting out an election.
Right, exactly. And one of the things, that I want to mention is that I think he's going for Texas because I think, I think there's starting to be an inkling of the not focusing on the same swing states anymore, and that if there's a chance you can take it. But also, I think he feels he's afforded himself this risk because Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, he's already basically got them in his mind. And based on certain polls and betting odds, that does seem to be the direction those three states are going. So,
Well, he's not getting Indiana.
no, we know
He's
that.
not taking that because the current vice president, that's his homegrown state. He's not getting that. I don't see him possibly taking out Georgia. There's a very small chance that he carves out that nice big enough slice of North Carolina and digs into that rural voters. But I don't really see that happening too often. But hey, anything can happen. There's a reason we vote.
Exactly. Let me tell you, there's one swing state that will forever be a swing state. It's this state of the United. That didn't work. That sounded better in my head. That sounded a lot better in my head. I meant to say something else. Anyway, but point is,
you get another try.
Nah, no, I've already given up for the. Nah, throw it away. Throw it away. I'll figure out another podcast. But no, the state of Texas, should it turn blue, and like I've said, based on certain demographic surveys, based on certain voluntary polls, on betting odds, on attention to different groups. Like I told you, like I think it was last week and the week before that in Florida. The surprising part is that President Trump is still outperforming Joe Biden among Hispanics in Florida. And, you know, it is what it is. And I think that could actually make the difference. But in Texas, Biden it's not that he's outperforming President Trump in a current status. He is outperforming whatever Beto O'Rourke had at the end of his senatorial election. And he's outperforming within that demographic. And you also have to remember that that state is growing in the cities near Houston, San Antonio, part of Dallas, near the border. There is still, I think, a legitimate potential. And like you said, it's a risk. It's a big risk. It's a big investment.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's bigly.
It's bigly risky. I think another thing that you've got to remember with Texas, and as we've seen, is a lot of legal immigrants from North America with Mexico and from South America and Central America, they can lean very heavily Republican.
Yeah, I've mentioned that before. I've said, look, if you get honestly, if it weren't for the stance on immigration from each party, if it weren't for the Democrats deciding they were going to be people who want to allow illegal immigrants a, let's say, a much easier path to citizenship and maybe a few more open arms at the border than the Republicans. Hispanics, for the most part, are not like, for the most part, are conservative. Like, I think they're very driven by the fact that, immigration is top priority because they're trying to get here for a better life. And I think the mindset is whatever makes it easier for me to try to actually get work done and try to actually start hacking out this dream of being in America, you know. But yeah, I think they're like socially, for the most part, especially older Hispanics who have been here for a while or who have been in another place and finally move here for a while. They are people who, and also I'm being deadly serious about this. The Hispanic church demographic, I think, needs to be its own category because it is a fervent. I'm being serious. It is a fervent and very lively group of potential voters. Now, like, and maybe not all of them are citizens. Maybe some of them are residents. Some of them are only here on certain types of visas. But should they be a big enough voting bloc, that is going to be a moneymaker. And you will see, I believe, a huge chunk of that Hispanic support for Democrats leak out and start tipping the bucket the other way.
Well, that's one of the big reasons why Marco Rubio was relatively successful in his 2016 campaign, is because that entire, as you said, that Hispanic religious population flocked to him.
Yeah, they flocked to him instead of Ted Cruz at the beginning, and I thought that was very interesting.
Well,
Then
people
again,
flock away from Ted Cruz.
I don't think flock is the right term. I think fly
They
away.
run with their arms flailing around.
They run with passion.
Yes.
All right. So to finish this off here, we're gonna bring it back to a local matter that was going on in our state of Maryland this past week. The county executive of Montgomery County, Mark Elrich, he put out an order demanding that private schools be closed until a certain amount of, I think for the first semester of what is to be the school year, be closed instead of making their own decision of whether to open or close. And this was done under the advice of the health department, the director of health for the county. And it follows the decision of Montgomery County Public School System to close until the next semester, which wasn't their original position. Originally, they were going to have 2 days in class, 1 day to clean, and 2 days of online instruction, which would have been an absolute disaster. Now, I'm being serious. I've seen, like, I mean, their systems, their technology availability, although they have the resources to do it, they're not very well versed in using that software and that method of teaching. So it would have been a very, and plus it's a huge county. It's full of an immense number of children.
Well, I've been in public school my entire life from K through 12 in public school, and none of my teachers knew how to skip an ad on YouTube. So I'm not sure how they're going to be able to navigate having full classes on Zoom and online lecturing.
I mean, yeah, and that's, yeah, it's just, that's a very, like, a one way, a singular way to put it, but also just thinking about all the obstacles that are in each other, like each teacher's way. So the right decision was made for the public schools to close, and even though in general I would agree that it'd probably be a good idea for private schools in the county to not open up until they find a really reasonable and thorough way to open safely. The reality is that it wasn't the county executive's decision or the health department's decision or position to make that decision, based on the laws of the state. And Governor Larry Hogan agrees with that position, and he overruled the mandate of the county executive, saying, basically saying the same thing, is that it wasn't in either one of their offices, the right to make that decision over the private school sector because of the way private schools function in that county or in this state. The protections they have for being a private school, like they're not under the direction of a public school system. They're not under the direction of the county executive. They are their own independent or sometimes semi conglomerated group of schools that have their own curriculum and that people pay for themselves. And so therefore, because the tax money isn't going to them, they're getting their own money by their own medium. The government is limited in what they can and can't do with private schools. And I think that was, even though I think it was the right idea of the county to try to, you know, tell them not to do it, I think it was the right decision by the governor to say that wasn't the county executive's decision to make.
Well, well entail with that. That would be like the president of the United States ordering all of the public schools in any one state to close. And as the federal government provides a very minuscule amount of funding towards state school systems, as does the state giving funding to private schools. So they're not beholden to the same standards. They don't fall under that same Board of Education rules, at least in the state of Maryland. And so it's not really their call on to keep these schools open or to close. As you said, I think it would be wise to close down and do it all online. However, it's not his call. It's not the county executive's call. It's not the health director's call. It's no call but the schools itself.
I am gonna say this, and Corey, I didn't let you know this earlier, but I have been given the opportunity. I have accepted a position as a part-time teacher in a private school.
Look
This
at you.
coming fall, and I just
I'm
want to
worried.
no, I want to make it clear, like they are actually gonna have in-person classes, but that's because the entire school population is between 30 and 40 people, including
Oh,
teachers.
okay. There you go.
No, it's like it's a small operation. It's attached to the church I'm attending right now, but it is something that they have also taken seriously. Like their protocols that they have in place about temperature checks, masks, how they're being used, and how kids are being entering and exiting the building, and how and when they're dismissed. The policies about, because there's families that are there. There are a group of families basically is what's going to be the school body, and if one child comes in with a fever, then the whole family's going to have to, you know, stay out for at least a day, or at least until whatever happens or whatever ailment they're going through subsides, and they, you know, don't get tested. And there's waivers being signed and everything, saying, or at least agreements being signed at the beginning of every week. Everyone is going to turn in from each household saying no one in this house has, to our best knowledge, been exposed or actually have the virus. And I think the measures are doing good, and I think this is a situation where I think they're doing a good idea. Obviously separate. They made the decisions before I was there, but me being apart from that decision making process, I think it was a good idea because they can actually manage themselves in a small building with a very small population to handle, and very stringent and very manageable um, guidelines that they have, which, looking at public records and everything, are even more involved than whatever some other schools are doing. So, yeah. So, yeah, I think each school population can make its own decision. If it's a big, rather large school, probably not a good idea to start classes. But if it's something like I said, like a 40-person school building where you have space to spread out and you have the means to make sure everyone is following guidelines and being well managed and well monitored, I don't know, I think you can go ahead and do that. So, and also, I just want to say about the Governor Hogan thing, I still believe, honestly, and I know you don't, necessarily might not agree with me, but I do believe that Governor Larry Hogan is prepping himself for for a 2024 presidential run. And I think there's a lot of noise about Governor Hogan, especially from Democrats and liberals in the state. But let's be honest, he hasn't done anything that has been detrimental to the health and to the best interests of the state. I think he's done very well, especially working with the other side of the aisle and making things work, being a well liked Republican governor in a very blue state.
Yeah, well, go most of people's gripes about him stem from issues inside of Baltimore. However, I think that it's almost misguided, as Baltimore has never historically shown as having the ability to handle itself or wanting help from Annapolis. And we saw that rampant with the Martin O'Malley administration not being able to do anything. I mean, Baltimore has gone through mayors and mayors and mayors and has literally found themselves back at square one.
And police chiefs and police chiefs and police chiefs.
One and the same thing.
Right. So yeah, I mean, but I think, I think Governor Hogan is racking himself up.
We'll have to see.
He has a book tour scheduled for, I thought it was next year, but it might have been pushed back. So, and he's also, like I said, he is the chair of the Governors Association of the United States. He is someone who works well with the other side. He could be the renewal of moderates in the Republican Party, which could happen. I honestly thought it was going to be Jeff Flake who was going to be that guy, but since he had retired from the Senate, but never know.
We'll see what happens in 2024. But until then, all we can talk about is this upcoming election.
Yep. So, yeah. So we're getting close. We're getting very close to convention time. We're getting very, very close to Joe Biden's vice presidential pick. We're getting close to, hopefully in a good, like I said, finality and a good just um, renewal of trust in the American democratic process. That's
America, not a democracy.
Right, but they use democratic processes in their laws, and this is one of them. And I think if there ever was a time when people wanted everyone's voice to be heard, it'd be right about now. So I think this is a very good opportunity. Hopefully, I'm really hoping that voter turnout comes up above 65%. Honestly,
that's a well wish.
I well, it's a wish.
It is. Yeah. Well, I believe that's going to be it for this podcast. We will either see you next Monday or whenever Joe Biden announces his vice presidential pick, whichever one comes first, you will see us here. And you can catch us next week on the Monday, August 10th, around in the evening time, anywhere from 7 to 9 will be on. But at any point, if Joe Biden announces vice presidential pick, barring any emergency between either of us, we'll be right here in an emergency broadcast. So click the subscription button and hit the bell so you can get notified if and when our podcast starts up. And if the emergency podcast starts, you'll get an immediate notification about it.
Right. And also, shameless plug, we are also doing, obviously, I wanted to touch on this, but better save it for Friday. The League of the People, the Football League of the People, the XFL has a chance to come back, being bought by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But if you want to hear more about that and many other things involving Taco Bell, we do have our sports podcast on Friday evenings as well. Right around the same time slot. And PJ Dolan is also with us. So that's always fun. And we hope to see you there, and we hope to see you back here whenever we get back. So that being said, I've been Gerald.
And I've been Corey.
And this has been We Talk Politics.